Mark Twain is credited with saying, "The return of my money is more important than the return on my money."
I feel the same way. It is better to make an investment that has a small increase and returns your seed money than it is to make an investment that has a potentially large return but fails to return your seed money.
Warren Buffett said the first rule of investing is don't lose. The second rule is remember rule number one there are no other rules. Think about it. If you lose your seed money, how are you going to get ahead financially?
One of the ways people lose their seed money all the time is getting caught up in average rate of returns. John Bogle wrote a book, Don't Count on It. It's a great book. He says we count in nominal dollars, but we should be counting in the dollars we can spend.
The real dollars, what's left after taxes, after fees, and all of those things, it can make a huge difference.
Let's just take an example. If you start with $100,000 and you make an investment and it magically does 100% this first year, well, now you've got $200,000, right?
Yeah.
And so this is great. We're going good. And next year you lose 50%. You say, oh, that's okay. I lost 50%. I still got a 25% average rate of return. But all I can spend is $100,000. That's all I've got. I'm right back where I started from. And I'm actually worse than that because inflation now has made those $100,000 less than what they were 2 years ago.
And you probably had some fees on it and taxes for the year that you earned 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is worse. But it can get even worse than that. You can actually have a positive average rate of return and lose money on the investment itself. As an example, just assume that you start with $1,000, you lose 50%, you're down to $500. You gain 80%, you're back up to $900. You're still $100 down, but that is a 15% positive average rate of return. So you can't depend on averages. You have to look at what the actual return is.
Only what we can take home. And, really there is no gain or loss until we actually cash out of an investment because all it is speculation until that point.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's really true. You see that in the real estate market. Someone can look on Zillow and say, hey, my home is worth such and such. But if they actually put it on the market, then you've got to have a buyer that says, yes, your home is worth such and such. And you've got to have that offer. You've got to have it completely sold before you know that your home is worth that. And did you really want that? Are you ready to leave that home right now? So there's an example of that, or some investment that, yeah, I make this much. Well, you've got to cash it out.
Absolutely. A lot of people are talking about real estate and how hot it is and what a great thing it is. And we'll be talking about that later in a podcast. But what about options? That's another thing that people think they're just going to make a killing in.
Yeah. So people that look at options, they might say, well, hey, I can make 20% on my options investments. But options are high risk investment. They can fluctuate quite wildly. And so even though you may be able to make 20% on one investment or on a few pretty consistently, an options trader is going to divide up their portfolio because they don't know what investments are going to succeed and which ones are going to lose. So if you're wise about it, you'll divide it up into several slices. So one slice of your portfolio might do 20%, but what does the rest of the portfolio doing during that time? And if an investment loses, well, that slice of the investment lost. At least you didn't lose your whole account. You can trade another day. But what is your portfolio doing overall? How big is the return and how consistent is it?
And that's why a lot of people say, well, let's just buy an index. Let's just do mutual funds or something like that so that we are spreading our risk out over a broad area. But then we come into the problem with, are you morally aligned with everything that is in that mutual fund? And are you willing to give up your rights of voting to the big corporations like BlackRock and some others that are voting for ESG all over the place?
Yeah, and for ESG, that's the environmental social governance factors that are basically being used to push a woke agenda on American companies and the American people.
Absolutely.
So much of our audience is interested in things that are against those environmental things. Some of these governances, not that they're against the environment, but they're against some of these governances and these woke agendas. So by day, they're fighting these things in their life and being against them, but their money is over invested in those funding the very things that they're against.
Right.
And that's not a good feeling when you start thinking about that. You're hoping your money does well, but are you really?
And
You know,
are your
so
investments advancing a globalist economy rather than an American economy? And that's a real concern for a lot of people too. And they don't understand that by where they're putting their money for investments, they might be supporting something they absolutely morally are against.
Yeah.
And that's a conflict of interest, and it eventually will affect you psychologically and emotionally as well when you find out those things.
Yeah, this goes to what something that we've discussed previously about investing according to things that you know about.
Mm,
And so a lot of people will come and be all excited, hey, say, hey, I'm earning 8% on my investments. Yeah, but you're paying 10 or 15% on a credit card.
yes.
How much is that helping you? Or I'm earning 8% on my investments, but then the fees that Jack Bogle was talking about a
yes.
second ago, how much of an effect is that really having? You know, many people see the 8% that's coming in the market, but they don't realize what that means in real spendable dollars. So let's just consider an example here. If you're earning 8% on $10,000 for 20 years, you'll end up with $46,600. But if you have a 2% fee that is subtracted, that's going to a money manager, a financial advisor, or a combination of those, then you're going to end up with just over $31,000
And
in
Mm.
John,
20 years.
that 2% fee that you're speaking of, is that pretty typical?
It depends on the type of investment that you're selecting. If you have a manager that's going through and selecting a lot of different investments and trying to beat the market, yes, 2% is not going to be too high.
Okay,
Or
so
if you have a manager that just wants to jump trades just to earn a 2% fee, you've got
Then
that
you
too.
potentially, yeah, it's kind of hard to measure all those variations once you get into it.
so we are going to have fees associated with this
Yes,
investment. Okay, so that's a non-negotiable. Okay, we've got this fee, and so this fee was how much?
2%,
2%.
and it comes
Okay,
out once a year.
okay.
So you lost over $15,000 of value in the investment, but you didn't pay that much in fees. Okay, you just lost the opportunity because of the fees that you paid along the way. So you paid about $7,800 in fees. You lost over $15,000 of potential account value.
Oh, that
So
makes
what's really
sense.
happening here is this is like the old proverbial cream on top of the milk. It rises to the top, and each year the money manager comes along and scoops that cream right off the top and doesn't let it compound for you. And so you're talking about the compound loss of interest that you could have earned if the manager wasn't taking his 2% fee.
Exactly, it's huge, and it adds up over a long period of time.
And going back to Jack Bogle, he talks about those fees. He talks then about inflation, and he talks about the taxation. And he says that what you thought you were going to have, you could end up with just 2% of that if
Yep.
we're not careful.
So that 8% example that we looked at, by the time you take out 2% in fees, you're actually at a net of about 5.8.
Just earning 5.8%. So not that 8% even. So then when people talk about, oh, you could learn 10, 12, 15%, the same thing is
Same
happening.
thing is happening, and the
They're
higher the rates, the higher the fees tend to be to get there.
Mm,
sure. Wow.
The higher the potential rates, I should say, because you don't always get it.
So here you are, you might have an investment where you're still, well, you're not losing your seed money, which is good,
Mhm.
but you're still losing some of the profits that you could have had you managed it more yourself.
Yeah. And for if you're really chasing those higher rates of return, oftentimes you are putting your seed money at risk, even if you don't realize how much. And that's another big risk to take into consideration.
So this comes down to the fact that we should be really investing in things that we're really knowledgeable about.
Mm-hmm.
And those people that have been successful, like Jack Bogle and Warren Buffett and Templeton, and some of the people that are big names in the investment world, they are educated about what they're purchasing, what they're putting their money in, because they don't want to lose their seed money, because the return of their money is more important than the rate of return on their money. We have an example of ourselves where we got involved in an investment that we really shouldn't have been involved in.
Mm.
And it was where there was a restaurant. It was a franchise, and this one restaurant was doing very, very well. And the owner came to us and said, "Hey, the franchise has asked me to take another restaurant 60 miles up the road from here, and I need some money. I'll put my restaurant that's doing really well and all of its equipment up as collateral for you." And we thought, "Yeah, great. This is great collateral. There's no loose proposition here."
Okay.
Or so we thought.
But the second restaurant failed. And when we went to get our money out of the equipment was gone. We didn't do enough investigation and get educated. That was a huge loss for us. It was a good lesson for us. And that's why we always say invest in what you know and understand.
Yeah. Well, we
So
got
did you understand the restaurant business?
Not at all.
no.
Even though we'd both worked in restaurants, we didn't understand the management of a restaurant and the entailment of the equipment and how that could just disappear.
And this was a partnership that we hadn't really explored really carefully. And so we learned a lesson. But we did learn a lesson because later on we had someone come to us. We had seen how they had paid a loan off over time. And they came to us later and said, hey, I have a need for a piece of equipment in my business. Would you finance this for me? And, that piece of equipment was collateral. It was something we knew about, something that we could either use or resell to get the value out of it if he didn't make the payments. But like I said, we had already watched his character over years of
Mhm.
making payments on another piece of equipment that he had. And that turned out to be a very good investment for us because he
Mm.
faithfully paid all along.
Another good investment that we've done is with our children.
Mhm.
We have built policies for them so that they can borrow from that to finance the things that they need to finance in life. And we've talked about it before, but two of my sons, they were able to use that to make a cash offer on a lot of equipment to start their business. And they had a lot of knowledge and understanding about the equipment they were purchasing and realized they weren't going to need it all, but they knew enough about it and they knew the market that they could sell that equipment and get more money for it than what they'd actually paid for those pieces of equipment that they didn't need.
And that was a great investment for them because they knew a lot about that equipment. Where if I had suddenly said, hey, I think I'm going to go buy this equipment, it would have been terrible because I don't even know the names of these machines. So, and for me to try to figure out what it is or what the market would be to try to sell some of that off, or to even try to use it, I would have no clue and not be able to get the dollars out of those machines that they can produce.
So just because a friend of ours has done really well in oil wells doesn't mean we will, because I don't know a thing about oil wells, okay? Or just because someone does really, really well in the S&P 500 doesn't mean that I'm going to do really well in it because I might be too emotional and want to move my trades in and out of that index more than they did. So
Mm.
it's all about what you know, understand, and are comfortable with when you make an investment if you want the return of your money and the return on your money.
A lot of people are attracted to the lifestyle that they see with certain investments that have succeeded for various people. And there's often a lot of things that you don't see in that picture. So, yes, an investment can be good. Is it the right investment for you? That's definitely something that needs your investigation into.
Having access to capital is necessary if you're going to make investments. Some people use their own money, some people use borrowed money. When we come back, we're going to talk about different ways to access capital.
Indexed universal life insurance is classified as permanent insurance, which is confusing because it behaves more like term insurance. That's actually what it's built on. I'm Stephen McPhee with McPhee Insurance. The appeal of IUL is that you can get protection of life insurance and the returns of the market all in one product. IUL is not actually invested in the market. It has a cash account, which mirrors an index. To protect the cash account from a poorly performing index, IULs have a floor rate, which guarantees the minimum return on the cash account to usually be no less than zero. However, they also have a cap rate, which sets a limit on the amount the cash account can return. It is concerning that the cap rate is not guaranteed. The insurance company is allowed to change it. Dividends earned on an index will not be mirrored in the policy. The return on an index with and without a dividend can be substantial. That's the investment element of IUL. The protection element of IUL, the death benefit, is provided by term insurance, which, while cheap initially, becomes expensive over time. So expensive, in fact, it often destroys the cash value of the policy. Fees are a problem as well. Of all the types of life insurance, IULs have among the most fees, and that gets expensive. Some people buy IUL because they want to get protection and investment all in the same product. Some people buy IUL because they are greedy. They want it to make them rich. And some people don't want IUL, but they end up getting it because they don't realize what they've been sold. Life insurance contracts, IUL contracts in particular, can be lengthy and hard to understand. This is my brother up in a scissor lift. The 4 columns of paper on the right, that's all one IUL contract. That's over 85 feet of IUL contract. If you have life insurance or are considering purchasing a policy, you owe it to yourself and your family to thoroughly read and understand the policy. At McPhee Insurance, we sell and review life insurance. If you want an independent life insurance review of a policy you already own or are considering purchasing, we can help you. It's well worth the $75 to have financial peace of mind. Contact us 702-660-7000 or by email team@mcpheeinsurance.com.
I think a bunch of you listening to this right now already know how easy it is to access capital from your whole life insurance policies because you have and you do. And the rate's pretty good right now, about 3 points below what you can access typical loans for. If you're in a position to access money from your participating whole life insurance policies right now, congratulations. You're in a position a lot of people wish they were.
You know, it is so easy to take a policy loan. Can you just explain how easy it is, Michelle?
Typically, think about going to a bank, asking for a loan. You've got to say what you want, put all your business plan together. You've got to sign away your firstborn. You've got to qualify. You've got to produce all your income, your tax pay, all that kind of
So
stuff.
you got to go through underwriting.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Underwriting for a loan. With the insurance company, you've already been underwritten to be into the exclusive club of a policyholder. And when you have cash value in your life insurance policy, you can borrow it. You don't have to prove anything. So we have a form. It has your policy number, has your name. You write in the amount that you want. Has to be equal to or less than the cash value you have available to borrow. You sign it and date it. You also note whether you want a check or want the funds deposited directly to your bank account. And we send it into the insurance company.
So
That's it.
what you're saying is
easy.
this is a signature loan.
It's very easy.
It requires
yes.
you to sign a form or make a phone call.
Yeah, and so if the amount that you want to borrow is low enough, I mean, the insurance company set a certain amount that if it's under that amount, we can just call over the phone and say, "Hey, so and so wants a loan. You've got the bank account on file. Go ahead and deposit it to that account." And insurance companies often say it takes us 5 to 10 business days to process the loan, and oftentimes people are seeing loans sooner than that. Sometimes it takes a little longer. It depends on their workflow
Mhm.
at the insurance company, or if you're getting a check mailed, sometimes that might take a little longer. But, give it a few weeks. If you've got a deadline coming up, call, find out how long is it taking, and, get the funds sooner than later. But, yeah, it's an easy process. People do it all the time.
So it's so easy to access. It's also important to remember that you want to pay that loan back just like you would any other loan, even though if there aren't immediate consequences for not making the scheduled payments. And the reason that's important goes to a concept called economic value added.
Yes. So if you're going to take a policy loan, you need to schedule out how you're going to repay that loan. But the pressure's off because you get to dictate how that loan is paid back. It's not some creditor, bank, or credit card saying, you don't make this payment, we're going to charge a late fee or we're going to add compound interest to this. So make a schedule, try to stick with it. But if something comes up and you can't make a payment, one of those scheduled payments, just tack it on to the end.
Yeah, and
Don't cheat yourself.
I think this is a really important point that you've just brought up, Tom, and I'd like to talk about that just a little bit more because people want to know, what is my payment schedule? The insurance company sets the rate for the loan interest, and the loan interest will be due once a year at the anniversary date of your policy. But as far as paying back the principal, there is no time frame for that. If you never pay it off during your lifetime, when you pass, it will be paid off before the beneficiaries are paid off. So there's no time frame as far as the insurance company is concerned. So So, yes, if you want to set up a payment schedule, do that. And we can even request the insurance company to draft whatever amount you choose at whatever time of the month you choose for those payments to come out and be applied towards your loan repayment. And then, going on vacation or your financial circumstances change, you can change that a payment amount or you could stop it for a while. You have the flexibility to make all those decisions.
So here it comes back to what we've talked about in on a recent podcast, and that it is this a performing debt or a non-performing debt? So if we've borrowed from the policy and it's performing and it's generating enough money to pay the interest and make us profit, then it might not be real critical that we pay that loan back as fast as we can,
Oh, so
because we've got a productive investment that is making those interest payments for us and building us a profit at the same time. However, if you've just taken a vacation with the money that you borrowed, that's, you got to make a schedule to repay that. Otherwise, now you've got interest that you're paying at least, and it's going to go indefinitely if you don't pay that loan off.
Yeah, and that's where the concept of economic value comes in, is because companies, when they used their own money, they were treating it as if it had no value. So yeah, maybe they'd put it back if they had extra profits or whatnot, but when they amortized it, made a plan to pay it back with payments so that they would pay interest on their own savings, then it became an improvement for their metrics because they were treating their own capital like it had a cost, which it did. A lot of people don't recognize that there is a cost to their own capital, but there certainly is, always.
And it becomes even better than what the corporate was doing with economic value added, because even while you have the loan outstanding against your policy, as long as you're paying the interest, you're also earning the return that the policy provides, the guaranteed return plus any dividends that are shared with you.
True.
So that actually, in effect, can lower the interest that you're actually out of pocket for.
It does. And a few reasons that you may want to repay the loan is, number one, so you can use it over again. Number two, if it is that non-performing debt that you were talking about, if you took a vacation or something, you want to get that money back in there so that it replenishes your savings. And number three, a lot of people like to work on paying their policy loans back as they approach retirement so that it's there so they can repurpose that money for an income stream.
So I was just talking with a client yesterday, and they need to put a roof on their office. It's going to be $30,000. And he said, should I just pay cash for it or should I borrow it from my policy? I said, well, look, if you borrow the $30,000 from your policy and you pay it back at $640 a month over 5 years, you'll have $38,000 that you paid yourself back. So you could have borrowed that money from the bank and give them that $38,000, but now you got your roof, you got the $30,000 that you borrowed to put the roof on back, plus you got $8,000 that would have been lost to interest to the bank if you had borrowed the money from them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good example. Now, we just had one of our clients contact us the other day. They said, "Hey, I want to talk more about using my life insurance policy for infinite banking." I'm really excited to talk to this client because over the years, they have been borrowing from their life insurance policy and using that money, but they have not remembered the piece about paying it back. And so I'm going to talk to them. We're going to talk about how to start making those payments back because that's going to restore the capital that they have in accumulation that they then can use for other things along the way.
Yeah.
And I
The
know
more
they're
often you pay it back, the more often it's there to use again.
that's right. And I know that they have been the phase that they've been in their life, they very much needed the access to the capital. So they really have valued what the policy has done for them so far. So now we're just going to add in that other piece. Remember to pay yourself back. And they've got this asset they started many, many years ago, and they're going to be able to continue to use it and have that policy serve them for many years.
So this brings us back to the 10-20-70 principle. A lot of people say, well, this is my money and my policy. I can spend it how I want. And they just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And they're using that money for non-productive loans. And they wonder why this isn't working. Well, the thing is that you've got to keep 10%. That's your policy premium.
Mm-hmm.
And you should only allow 20% of your budget, what you're making, go toward repaying even policy loans.
Yeah.
Because we need to be honest with ourselves and say that is like a debt to myself. And if I don't pay it back, I'm actually robbing myself of future rewards. And so as we help people design policy loans and how they're going to pay it back, we always go back to this 10-20-70. Are you borrowing more than 20% of your budget is going to be able to repay?
Yeah, that's a great point. And sometimes when people don't have credit card debt and other personal debts, they may go a little bit higher than the 10% of their income going toward life insurance premiums. Sometimes 20 to 30% is not going to be unsustainable for a time. But then if they have policy loans outstanding, yes, you want to make sure that that repayment is coming out of the 20%, doesn't exceed that 20% to cause financial discomfort.
So then that 70% is living expenses. And it's always amazing to me when I talk to somebody who isn't saving anything. I'll be talking to them on the phone and they're interested in the infinite banking concept. They want to do it, but they've never saved money before. And they're like, oh, where's this money going to come from that I can pay a premium? And they're already, their living expenses are high. Their oftentimes their credit payments are really high too. And they've not been saving. And it's interesting as I tell them, this principle, you've got to save 10%. They find ways. If they're really, really interested, they find ways to cut their living expenses because they so much want this asset.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to see. I can't make those decisions for them, what they're going to cut. But it's neat
You
to
can give them
see.
the framework for doing it, and then
Yes.
they figure out ways to creatively make it happen.
Yes, and they make it happen because they
Yeah.
want it so much.
And the people that just continue to borrow and don't pay the interest on those loans and they're not having productive loans, they're going to lose their seed money. They're going to lose their policy because the interest will compound to such a degree that they won't be able to afford even to pay the premiums on those policies.
So, what about taking a policy loan? Should somebody take a policy loan to finance a piece of equipment if they can get a loan at a lower rate?
It depends on how you want to approach that. If we can get a loan at a lower rate, that's great. And, we've done that in the past. We talked about that when we bought our tractor. We got a 0% financing package. Yeah, we'll use Kubota's money. That's not a problem. We did the same thing when we bought one of your cars in the past, Michelle. Ford Motor Company gave us a great rate. So at the same time, we have to realize that if we would have borrowed from our policy or not got that great rate, what interest rate would we have paid? And we should be thinking about setting that money aside too for seed money for future when rates may not be as low as they are.
If history is any indication as to what may happen in the future, then interest rates could go down and there may be more attractive options for accessing capital than taking a policy loan. But right now, taking a policy loan is a very attractive way to access capital.
If you're one of the people who started a policy 10 years ago, you're sitting in a real desirable position right now. Not because of what you did today, yesterday, even a week ago. It's what you did 10 years ago. It's the old exponential curve. Michelle, you're going to show an example of that.
On this paper, there's the y-axis representing growth. The x-axis represents time. When you start a policy, the growth is very low. But over time, it starts increasing and has exponential growth. When someone delays starting a policy, they don't cut off the early years where growth is low. Instead, they cut off the later years with the exponential growth.
Wow, that is just an amazing illustration. I think everybody needs to be able to see that.
If you're just listening to this, go check out the YouTube version so you can see that demonstration. We'll put the link in the description. Here's the takeaway. Don't wait for the perfect time to get started. Get started now. Then you'll be ready when opportunity comes along at the perfect time.
Tom is interviewing a real estate investor, and we're going to watch that interview and discuss it right here next week on Wealth Talks.